Good morning and welcome to the Monday Call, brought to you by NZ Funds. I'm Stefan Clark, Chief Client Officer, and in the studio we have James Grigor, Investment Strategist. As Chief Executive of Southern Cross, Nick Astwick heads one of New Zealand's most significant organisations, with close to 1 million members and a unique view of the health, ageing, and well-being of the nation. With 25 years at the heart of New Zealand business, including almost a decade at the helm of Southern Cross, Nick is one of the country's best informed voices on longevity and what it means for how we plan, secure, and spend our later years. Nick, it is an absolute privilege to have you here, and we're very excited about today's conversation. I thought we could kick off with a little bit about your journey before Southern Cross and to Southern Cross and about Southern Cross.
Great. Well, thanks very much, and thanks for having me here today. I'm a Cantabrian who's living in Auckland, so I started in provincial New Zealand. I was very fortunate enough to join the National Bank as a sort of young grad. So I spent 4 or 5 years going through the National Bank to a head office in Wellington, which was really, really special. I thought it was one of the best brands to learn, as a young start out. I went 5 years, worked for UBS Warburg in London. And then came back a little bit disillusioned with investment banking. And I wanted to, when you're in London, you make that decision, am I going to stay forever or am I going to come back? And I didn't want to come back just for New Zealand's sort of beauty. I wanted to come back and make a positive dent for New Zealand. And so a few of us, a wonderful team, set up Kiwi Bank. That was blood, sweat and tears for 14 years. And that, for me, was a really meaningful organisation. I do believe financial services is the musculoskeletal system of the economy. It is absolutely financial services. And so I really loved setting up Kiwi Bank and scaling it to that level. And then obviously Southern Cross presented itself 10 years ago, which was a very meaningful, purpose-orientated health business. And so the last 25 years have been Kiwi Bank and Southern Cross. Loved every moment of it. But that's coming to an end now, December the 4th.
An exciting moment. And we won't delve into your future just yet, but tell us a little bit about Southern Cross. Everyone knows about Southern Cross, but no one really, other than you, and perhaps some others in your executive, really know about Southern Cross. How does it, it's nearly 1 million members, health services across the country. How do you describe it?
Well, we're a for-purpose, health-related group. I mean, that's the best way. But when I say so, brand, I would say. So there's 2 big parts to our group. The first is what I call health-related financial services: your health insurance, your pet insurance, your life insurance, and your travel insurance. That's the CEO I'm of. And so that is what's called a friendly society structure, which is a little bit like a mutual. And so that's a for-purpose, for-customer financial services group. And so we're trying to look after the health-related financial risks of Kiwi. That's pretty much what that business group does. The other side of the brand is the healthcare delivery side. So this is sort of 11 hospitals, many joint ventures, a lot of allied health. And so we've got both funder and provision within the group. Now, Southern Cross started in 1961. It actually started by the doctors who wanted to have a choice rather than just the government delivering health-related services. That the sense of choice for New Zealand is to have a public and private provision. But the last 30 years, it's probably been more customer and member driven than doctor driven. But it is really, really important when I look across the world. Full countries that have full public health systems are in trouble, and those who have full private are in trouble. It's actually the combination of both that can provision health services for its citizens over the long term.
Okay. And I guess at a really high level, what does having that many members tell you about New Zealanders' health and well-being as a whole? How do we fare as a country?
Yeah, when you look at, there's 3 big health funders in New Zealand. There's the public health system, which is 30 billion plus. Then you've got our accident funding system of ACC, which is about 6 billion. And then you've got the private health insurance, which is probably now getting up to 2.5 billion, 3 billion of funding. So they are the big funders in New Zealand. And so ACC and private health are the main funders of the private health system. as you say, about 3 out of 10 New Zealanders elect to fund and use their hard-earned money to have access to private healthcare, and we've got 2 of them. Whereas about 60, 6% of the premium of the health market, and about 60% of the lives. So we are large, in the funder, but I think we're large because we've earned that, not just over 60 years. We've earned that in a sense that if you be really customer driven, you really deliver health and you take the friction out of those experiences, then we've earned that position over time.
It's obviously something, health, I can sense when you're talking, there's a lot of passion in there. How did you, I guess, your mind change in arriving? You would have known what you're getting yourself in for at one level, and now that you're thinking about
Yes.
the next stage, what's the discovery for you through that?
Well, I've obviously had a long track record in financial services. I do really deeply believe in the power of financial services, and particularly, as I said, as the backbone to the economy. Health was my learning edge over the last 10 years. And what I've learned from that is we love to attack health, and we love to attack health on the front page of the papers, don't we? You know how poor it is. But deep down, on one, it has got a resonance like no others. And while we're a bit of a quiet achiever, we don't sort of beat our chest and we're not on the front pages of everything. But what I've learned is health has a real resonance to it. And I think when you take it for granted for a long, long period of time, but when sickness strikes, suddenly the value of health reshapes your whole context. And I think that's what I've learned, is the really passionate about preventing sickness and the steps that you can take there to do that, because that's all you've got at the end of the day. I mean, your health is your long-term wealth.
When you think about in that sense, as achievement as CEO, growing the number of people that can get access to that type of healthcare, or is it, and you're probably going to say both now that I'm starting to ask this question, but I guess the people, your members, you want to give the best possible service you possibly can, but not everybody can sort of get that access to it. So what's the way up between growing members but also giving the best possible care? Because that seems to be the difficulty, because at some point you've got this cost of living, so it's less affordable, not just because of the cost of healthcare, but everything. But on the other hand, the health system, public health system, is under real stress. So how do you sort of manage those two pull push, and how do you sort of manage the business growth, if that's how
that's right. Well, I think there's 2 answers to that. The first is CEO. I think any CEO of today, their job is to make sure that their proposition is relevant. I think you can be functionally excellent all you like, but if you're irrelevant, you're gone. And there's a track history of organizations that become irrelevant. And so I think you've got to fight for that relevance. I think that has been the core of our strategy from day one, is how do we earn the right to be relevant? And that's largely part of the strategy. The other thing I would say is a mutual is we don't have that short-term quarter-on-quarter performance stuff. We invest for 50 to 100 years. And so that's what the power of the mutual is ultimately, is to say we can make decisions over the long term that fundamentally can go out 10 to 50 years. And my job 10 years into a 60-year is to make sure that the next 50 years is more secure. And so I think balancing those two, you've got to be relevant, but you've got to make good long-term decisions to do that. When you look at our strategy, there's only 3 big po on that. The first is to be a bloody good insurer. You have to be functionally excellent, and the proposition has to be relevant. The second is we're moving from health insurer to health management business. We realise that the value is actually in the quality of life of our member, not just funding their sickness when they need it quickly. And the third one is to work with clinicians to reshape the private health system to make sure it is more sustainable, because affordability is a critical part. And so I think that's our long-term strategy to make sure that we are relevant today and into the future.
That's so much harder than a profitability metric for a listed company. I
Very.
mean, it's like sometimes you must go jeepers. If only it was just P&L, but it's just not at all, is it?
Well, ours is ultimately about saving members' premium.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
the billions and billions of dollars of avoided premium is actually our core value driver. And what I've learned in financial services, in banking, it was never margin as the value driver. Annuity is tenure of membership is your annuity, is your actual value driver. And it's the same in our business. Actually having more members staying for longer because they're more relevant is the value driver of our business, like many others in financial services.
And I guess you get scale benefits, although, at a million, you're probably already experiencing a lot of those. But does that form part of how you think about delivering more? Is it better just to have bigger client member base, and then that allows you to deliver more value, or is it that's sort of capped out at some point along the way? And
well, I think as CEO, you've got a choice. Am I going to invest in being a better business or a bigger one? And we've always invested by being a better business, but actually being a different business to the rest of the category. We've just happened to be bigger. I mean, our operating costs per dollar of revenue is about 9 cents on the dollar. So pretty much 92 cents of our premium goes back to funding our members' healthcare. The industry is about 65 cents. Yeah. And so no one really knows that we're really a money go around on that. What they know is that we're there when they need them, and we make it very easy. We're trying to get rid of claiming in health insurance. Can you imagine that? We want to fund what you're entitled to at the point of sale, and that's what a mutual is making sure that the proposition lives at the moment of the customer experience.
The interplay between financial services and the product you're financing, healthcare in some form. How do you think about that? Because it's so inextricably linked, and it's obviously the backbone or the skeleton for all of it, and yet you can look at it through quite clinical terms or financial terms.
Well, yeah, I think if you look at the mutual model, our shareholder, for a better word, because we don't actually have shareholders, is the million members. So we've got to always operate in the long term in their interests. Yep, like a shareholder base, you would do that. So there's no real difference. And so we're constantly looking around how do we spend those million members money wisely, but also too making sure that the collective interests of those membership are protected. Yep. And so very, very similar to a shareholder model. Yep. But it's that's frontal lobe all the time.
It's interesting that because that membership model, like if someone asked, do you want better provision of service and lower premiums, everybody would say yes, which is totally opposite of perhaps the profitable model where shareholders want more profit, they want prices to rise and be able to push them through and things. How much of a restriction is that to be able to because there's certain financial conditions you have to meet in terms of being a insurance company. Do you find that members understand that, and while we've seen it especially over the last few years or since COVID really, the premiums have had to move quite substantially in the industry, and members don't like that, but they also want their society to sort of
that's
be
true
functional.
Yeah I mean, if you look since post-COVID, and then obviously there was a lot of challenge in the public health system through its restructuring process. I mean, we have become more valuable and we've become more expensive at the time. That's very paradoxical. We've only largely become more expensive, not because the cost of procedures are going up. The cost of procedures, because we contract for a large amount of them with our provision, they're going up less than CPI. And I don't think a lot of people understand that, but the price of your knee surgery for the last 10 years has gone up less than CPI. It's actually, in our model, is our members can use more and more services. So CPI is the same basket of goods. In our world, the basket's getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And that is actually the challenge, what we call utilization. And so that's what we have to sort of fundamentally fix, is making sure all our members get the right care in the right setting at the right time. And I think that's the challenge for Southern Cross, is to make sure we've got a private health system.
Is that aging population, or is that you're just providing more services, or is it a bit of both?
Well, we've got to balance that. Of course, we've got to compete against everyone else, so our products have to stack up. a large amount of technology in health is growing so quickly at the moment, and so we have to meet the needs of our market like any other business would. What we just want to do is make sure that it's in the interests of the collective members, because it's their hard-earned money that we're using, and so we've got to balance all of that, and that's always a trade-off. But if it's in the interest of the collective membership, we'll fund it.
I've heard you talk about the gap between lifespan and
Yeah.
health span, and can you share what you think that gap is, or how you describe that gap, and then how we close the gap, if you will?
Yes, well, I think if New Zealand's average lifespan is about 82, 83 years old, but their health span is only 70. So New Zealanders on average lose the last 12 or 13 years of their life to some form of sickness. Yeah. And we are largely a quality of life proposition. And so we are trying to claim back those 12 or 13 years. There's a great book out there written by Dr. Peter Artia, which is called Outlive, which is a little bit of the secret to the quality of life and preventing the four horsemen, he refers to them as, which is your cancers, your neurodegeneration, your diabetes, and your heart disease. Now, they're largely second-order effects of poor metabolic health. And I think this is what people are starting to learn, that while genetics may be 20% of your risk profile, your lifestyle is 80% of your lifestyle. And so this lifestyle medicine really focused on reducing the risk profile of the horsemen coming is actually going to be the new frontier. And when you look at a lot of how pharma and medicines are changing, you look at GLP-1s, which is your Ozempics and those sorts of things, that sense of reducing those risk factors is going to be an incredible transformation. And so I keep on saying, everyone talks about their knee surgery, yeah. But what is knee surgery at the end of the day? It reduces pain. It gives you more mobility fundamentally. It allows you to play golf, connect with your community, get on the grounds with your grandkids. And so just your hips and knees and shoulders has extended quality of life quite dramatically. So that's access to healthcare and preventative healthcare and looking after what God's given you well is going to be the secret to extending those quality of life.
Just jumping back on that Ozempic comment, do organisations like Southern Cross fund that at the moment?
We don't fund that at the moment, but of course,
it's a really interesting one.
Well, it's an annuity cost, isn't it? So hips and knees, insurers are good with doing transactions, no knowns, but annuity costs. But in the right setting, in the right delivery system, of course we'll fund that if it's the right.
Because then, I guess overall, then if it prevents other more
correct downstream things, and so we've got to be really cautious though about spending that money wisely to avoid something down the track. Because remember, a member could leave us in 5 years' time, and the benefits are 10 to 20 years' time. But it is the right thing to do.
Does that come into a real mathematical calculation then?
Of course, it's a massive actuarial calculation.
Because my sister-in-law is an actuary, and I can't. After 3 sentences, I'm confused what she's talking about. But I
mean, it's unlikely we're just going to say everyone gets the opportunity for that. But if it's in a pathway of care, so in other words, if you've got too much load bearing on your knees, for example, Ozempic in that right setting could be exactly the right thing to reduce the incidence of needing a knee surgery component. So it will be very targeted and very intentional in due course.
And it presumably turns on how expensive it is. So I'm sure the price of medicines like that will, I'm not sure. They may decline over time, and then availability will grow with it. So
yes.
I'll just have one more about that age. What was it? Age gap and
lifespan and healthspan.
Yeah. Is that 12 years or so in New Zealand? How does that compare to the Australia, US, UK? Is that bad?
Western economies are very similar. Yeah. They've got the sort of same dynamics of lifestyle. Because if you look at what's robbing us of those 12 years, there's what we call social determinants. So in other words, people that have poor education, poor lifestyles, poor job prospects, their health deteriorates a lot faster than the opposite. So we do know that social determinants play a huge role in the demand for health. Because remember, the healthcare system is actually just a downstream system from housing and education and economy and equality and those sorts of things. That's where chronic disease burden can happen. And so you've got to get upstream in the social determinants, but you're going to see a lot more, like we are going to do, is sort of intervening on behalf of our members to help them reduce the number of sickness. We have to delay sickness fundamentally, and that is possible through metabolic health. So your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your waist circumference, all those sorts of things that we've been talking about for a long, long time. I think we found the modern language of actually improving that. And what we're seeing in the younger generations is that's what they want to know. They want to avoid sickness. And so that mindset, the baby boomers will fix me when I'm broken, has often been the mindset. But this young mindset is very much about, I need somebody in my life that's going to help me prevent sickness from happening.
Why is it that we, at least not the young generation, if you will, but in the past we haven't given health that much attention? It's always assumed that the body will work until it doesn't, and then someone will pick me up.
Yes.
And obviously you're saying that's changing culturally. Do you have a sense of where that comes from, or why it is the way it is?
Well, I sense, this is just an observation, but health is actually quite a personal thing. It's not like we're running around telling everyone about our health stats, even though there are some sections of the populations who do. So it's always been quite a personal thing, and humans are instant gratification more than long-term planning. I mean, that's what you guys do. I think it's a lot of wealth development and wealth management is getting people to think very long-term now. So they're starting to think very long-term. And, cultures are defined as what do we care about? And I think we're starting to see that cultural shift about preventing sickness. How do I stay well? You're seeing that in younger people changing their lifestyles and those sorts of things. So I think there's a generational shift there. I would say that there's a lot of research, education, logic, technology that's enabling that to happen at a faster rate. But I just think lifestyle medicine, longevity is going to be a part of medicine. Not just the classic clinical medicines.
Maybe it's me speculating, but maybe it's partly a function of, with the internet and science as it is today, so much, the data is just more available and shared.
Yes.
Through all societies more, and so it's hard to face it down if it's going to have ultimately a benefit for you. Which actually brings me to my next question, which is you've used the word assuring health rather than ensuring health, which is it's a neat phrase. I guess that's an extension of that concept of expanding your health span.
Yeah, I think from a strategy perspective, I mean, Southern Cross would describe itself as we're in the industry of health insurance, but we're actually in the business of health assurance. So assuring our members of their health is actually the business we're in. If we keep on being in the business of insuring, which is a set and forget peace of mind, good bill payer, when things go wrong, that is not relevant for the next 50 years. Yeah, it will always be a fundamental pillar of it, but we need to stretch a bit further. So health assurance is actually what the market is demanding. And actually, a large amount of the insurance model is giving assurance. Okay, I've got Southern Cross with me. If something goes wrong, I know that they're for good. Yep. So it gives a huge amount of assurance. But we're trying to move into that health management space. I need to assure our members of their health span maximisation. For those who really want it, that's who we're going to address to.
Is this all coming from? I mean, healthcare costs are rising. But they're not. It's more people need it perhaps because of aging population and the number of procedures and all those sorts of things that you were talking about. But is that because we have to think like that? So don't get me wrong. I want to assure my health, not insure my health. I don't want to be as an individual. I'm sure we all think like that. But we kind of have to as well, don't we? Because otherwise the entire system breaks. Especially, I'm thinking more of the public system. If we don't start assuring health, then we'll like as we get during a big flu thing we're having now, you overwhelm the system and it breaks. Is that a necessity around developed world because of the aging population and that sort of thing, or do you see it more as a better way of doing business for the mutual?
Well, I think when I stand back, I mean, when you look at the health industry, and I call that this as a sector, the demand for health is going to skyrocket. So yes, you've got demography, aging populations. You've also got people living longer. Um, uh, you've got non-communicable diseases, not just communicable ones. Yeah. And so there's a massive demand profile, and then you've got technology is not reducing demand, it's actually increasing demand. So you've got a curve that looks like that, and you've still got a health system that is largely physical in its delivery. And so there's a big gap that's going to form over the next 50 years. And so we believe it's only going to be data and technology and some personalization that's going to fill that gap, because there's no other way. And so we've got real business model challenges in the next 50 years, but we do see hope in how technology is going to significantly be able to deliver a health plan for you one-on-one, because it's largely been, what's your family history?
Yeah.
Now, when you look at parts of the world, it's very much all personalized medicine. They're mapping your genome to your cancer care treatment and different drugs. It's going to get very, very personalized. And I think that's a real hope, that the health system becomes delivery down to one, not populations.
Is that on one side it's really interesting for a start that I'd never really thought of technology as increasing healthcare demand, but because you think it would help it, actually it increases it, not reduces it.
Well, and for a long time, the health system has been tried to avoid the worried well. I mean, remember what a health system is. It's largely processing symptoms to treat. That's how doctors have been educated on, of course. And imagine having a worried well where everyone worries about their health and overloads the system. So it is a very justifiable mindset, but the system is going to have to deliver to healthy people, preventative people, and sick over the period of time.
So then what happens when because it's great, some of that technology is great from the drug advancement and procedures and technology. My old man was a doctor. They developed the first bone densitometry machine.
Mm-hmm.
If you saw it now, you'd laugh. This thing was like the size of a room. It was just this big unwieldy thing that probably can be done with an iPhone now, but it was amazing. Technology advances. But at the same time, so that's positive. But at the same time, does greater exploration mean that actually there'll be a lot more things that people won't be able to be insured for because we already know that they have them?
Yes, I think the insurance model, again, works on the collective good. So if you know all the things that are potentially going to go wrong with you, you may elect in or out of those ones. But it's not that precise.
Yeah.
If you look at Peter Attia's book, and there's a really good example about bone density. If you think of those 12 years that get robbed, a lot of it is lack of strength. Your slips, trips, and falls are still one of the big predominant things about where sickness creeps in. So, he's about zone 2, exercise, muscle strength. That's good for insulin processing. So there's a lot of sort of the basics in that. But yeah, as it gets more personalized, it is harder to insure. Yeah, there is no doubt about that. Because again, we're a peace of mind luxury proposition. There is still a public health system out there. Yeah, it is rationed, and you may not get prioritized. And so we've actually got to evolve Southern Cross from, as I say, that good set and forget peace of mind that will always be there. We will always make sure our members get the healthcare they need, but to try and move upstream, into giving them a quality of life.
How do consumers feel about paying to prevent something versus paying to respond to something? Because when you're trying to prevent something, you've got, let's say there's 100 people, will only manifest in, say, 20 people, but every one of the 100 are sort of funding it. Does that make sense? And so there's a tension where and perhaps that's why the insurance model.
Wouldn't you want to know that?
Well, I don't know.
I would want to know. I'd pay for that.
Well, then there's a difference between information about it and because you know the risk. You know the risk of something. You don't know that it's going to actually occur to you, but you're paying for potentially mitigating the risk. And then, and then you're also, subsidizing others, and so there's a tension there. Or I imagine there is.
Yeah, but it's a tension that can be effectively resolved. You're right. If we just screening is a really good example. Let's just take bowel screening. If we just gave everyone a bowel screen, that would be a complete waste of members' money. But I can tell you, we're getting a lot more precise in terms of where we should bowel screen. So if you took 100 members, 10, we would definitely want to have a bowel screening at your 40s. And so that's the job of us, is to get a very good targeted population, because the members' money, if I can prevent your colorectal cancer from happening,
Please,
10 out of 100 times rather than 100 out of 100, then that relative to a 60,000 colorectal cancer surgery, that is spending members' money wisely. So that's the job of the insurer, is to really identify where that population risk, be very intentional and targeted about that. And that is an absolute win-win in terms of quality of life and spending members' money wisely.
yeah, understood. What would a healthier, this is a bigger picture question, but what would a healthier, sort of more prosperous New Zealand for you look like now that you've been in this place and seen so much? How do you think it's going to play out over the next 20 years?
Well, for me, it's wealth and health. Yeah. When you look at prosperous nations, they've got two things going for themselves. Firstly, they've got the social determinants, good education, equally spread, not massive inequality on wealth, job security and prospects, good economy, strong long-term planning. So there's that sense of the social determinants are well managed upstream. They have very good health system delivery. New Zealand does actually have that in the scheme of things. So there's a lot on what I would call the health of the populations. And then what you guys are really fighting for is the wealth of it. And New Zealand has had a wealth issue for a very, very long time, and we're afraid to admit it. But if you look at, as I say, Norway's a very good, a couple of trillion in their super fund to our 80 billion. We're a long way behind. And I think, but we're learning. When I sort of came back and worked with the team about Kiwi Bank, we were quite poor as a country scaling business. We used to be able to sell out at 5 or 6 million. We'd never really get it to a medium. But with the Xeros of this world, with the Halters and the Rocket Labs, we're starting to have a little bit of a wealth base now. We're starting to be able to learn how to industrialize business rather than selling it out at 6 billion. We're largely going overseas to do that rather than here. I know a lot of our wealth money is going into the top 7 because it's the customer's money and they need to get a yield for that. But I think we're heading in the right direction. I just think we've still got to double down on being ambitious and scaling business as a large scale rather than just being a good idea generator. We've got to be a good industrialist of those ideas, and it's starting. But I think we've got a lot of catching up to do.
And is when you think about your journey, is that something you want to sort of jump into next? Are you wanting to do more of that kind of entrepreneurial piece, or is it that because leading a very large organization is a very, very tricky thing to do, and not many Kiwis, frankly, seem to be able to do it successfully in organizations of that size. So I guess you've got a lot of options on sort of where you put your energy next.
Yeah, my energy just goes in. I'm a deep believer of the potential of New Zealand. We're only here for that reason, aren't we? I do believe that. But and so my next context is I'd like to work with organisations that fundamentally believe in prosperously improving our country. Rather than just being a director on a board. I had no interest on that. It's actually being with the right brands that can make a difference for New Zealanders. That's my deep belief. It is ideological, but a lot of people, we've got to love this country. We got in a real funk. And I don't know why. That's not New Zealand Inc. It was actually, and it was the leadership of this country, not just the politicians that got into this funk. And what I do believe is New Zealand still looks up to government. It is big. It's the big employer. It's got all the money. In America, they don't. They look to enterprise. And I believe business and enterprise needs to play a bigger role in the prosperity of this country and equally share that prosperity, more equally across New Zealanders.
There seems to be
that is a future.
Yeah, that seems to be a real issue in not just New Zealand. You see it. My wife's British, so sort of keep in touch with what's going on there. There's this. I don't want to contribute to society in terms of tax, but I want all these handouts from government, just from a business perspective. And actually, it's what the government is there to solve market failure. Whatever your political beliefs are, I think everybody would agree that if there's market failure, government needs to intervene. But we've gone from this, and I used to hate the phrase number 8 why, but we really have gone to what can the government give me to help me run and grow and make my business successful? And it's like, who cares what they can do? Let's get after it ourselves. There's plenty of smart people, well-educated society, really ambitious.
Yeah.
Just get on with it.
Get on with it. Yeah.
The world's never been so closer as well.
Well, that's the thing. If you look at the world has never been so close. I mean, we can industrialize and reach the world quicker. I mean, look at Gen AI. It's just going to be a superpower for that too.
It's probably an exciting time, but also I'm just curious as to where you're gonna focus your time, because I think it's a big issue, and it's not just a New Zealand issue. It's an issue in this, and it goes back to that famous was it Bill Clinton who said it, or one of his advisors? It's the economy, stupid.
Yeah,
people are feeling angsty because nothing's happened in the economy in this country for quite some time.
Exactly right. Yeah. I think there's been a lot of looking up. I agree, but yeah, we have been a farm that's had an economy attached, was the old, wasn't it? That was pretty much how the world would look at New Zealand. But I think we're now getting 50-50-ish. I just think I'm a big believer in that. 100 scaled businesses reaching into the world gives a powerful economy. It can't just go to the small few, though. It has to be spread wisely. But, that is New Zealand's future. And I think we can not just be a wonderful place to live. It can be a place where you can have a career. You can be prosperous. And I think that's New Zealand's future. It is its opportunity.
Can I ask you then, from this topic we're talking about, but also from your current role as a CEO of a health insurer, or assurer, is Australia? What are Australia doing right? Let's start first with healthcare. It's quite a different system. A lot more people have private healthcare because there's that incentive to do it. But can you explain? Is that a better model? Should we be thinking about what they do? Because we always look over the ditch and go, we're doing better. Actually, they just seem to be doing better because the economies grow. And as soon as their economy stops growing, they will come back.
Yeah. Well, I think the Australian private health insurance is a lot more integrated with its public insurance. So what the government of the day, I think it went down to Paul Keating a long, long time ago, it said, how do I, for the citizens of Australia, how do I maximise the ability to get the healthcare they need? And they were very intentional in saying, we need a public and private health system, and we are going to intervene to make sure the incentives and disincentives are right. So they put tax incentives in to take private health insurance when you're younger, because when you're younger, you don't think you need private health insurance, and some disincentives when you're older. And so then they have what's called risk equalisation and community rating. So everyone pays the same, and there's incentives when you're young and when you're old to stay in that. So they've been intentionally designed at a system level that has not been New Zealand's story. New Zealand's story is ideologically the public system does health and the private system exists. I think that is maturing. I think a lot of the politicians are looking to Australia. They've got to try and meet the needs of their citizens, and starting to see us as a little bit more of the solution than the problem. I'm not saying that apparatus will come through, but you've got to, I think a government does need to look at how it's going to do that sustainably over a period of time. And so there's lots of positives in the Australian health. There's a lot of negatives too. There's no perfect system.
That's interesting. That was, I guess, the crux of the question is that a system we want? And actually, every system has its pros and cons. And
it very quickly becomes ideological. I remember the last election, I think it was Chris Hipkins being asked about, I don't know if you remember this moment on TV, asked about whether he had private health insurance. Well, first he was asked something to the effect of, do you think New Zealand health insurance works for New Zealanders? And he was like, yes, 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 of course. And then promptly afterwards, do you have private health insurance? And he was, of course, forced to say, yes, I do. And then, well, how do you reconcile the two of those? You wouldn't get it if you didn't think you had it, if you didn't think you needed it. And so it intrigues me that, or I guess it's, how do you define what good is and what fit for purposes, and what, and an ideological approach versus a practical approach? Those things are really important, right?
Well, I think, as a CEO, your main job is to define reality and give hope. So I'm very much a realist, rather than an ideologist. But I think New Zealand has been extremely well served with this health system. And actually the private system is largely complementary to the public system. So I am not a big fan of saying private over public or public over private. Public is very good at your emergency care, your chronic care management, your population health. We're good at elective care, prevention-orientated stuff. So I just think in the defined reality, you've got to be very logical in how do I set it up, to make sure my citizens can get the healthcare they need it when they need it. And I think that's a very logical decision, not an ideological one.
Interesting. Having been now in the role for 10 years and obviously leadership roles before that, what would you like to tell yourself when you started out in the role? Have there been any discoveries along the way that I wish I'd known that 10 years ago? This is a piece of information that would have really served me.
Yes, of course. I think leadership development is an always on topic. And again, you never learn from good cultures, you learn from bad cultures, you never learn from good leaders, you learn from bad leaders. So, I've had all of that over my career. But what I've probably, when I look at great CEOs, there's a number of characteristics that they have. The first is, as I said, they're very good at holding truth and not selling hope, but good strategy, good plans, good decisions. I think that's critical, number one. I had to learn not to be optimistic nor pessimistic, both forms of fatalism. And so I think that's been a really good thing, because I was quite ambitious and optimistic. But you need to counter that with really strong logic and realism. Great leaders, for me, are very intentional, they're very self-aware, and they're very reflective. And so this intentionality is actually, a lot of people aren't. They're not prepared to state their position or go for an objective. And so I think great leaders are very intentional, even though it's uncomfortable. They are very self-aware. They know thyself, and they work to their strengths. They don't try and hide sort of weaknesses. They're very open to padding that. So I think they're very sort of self-aware and very reflective too. They understand that my style didn't work in that setting very well, but it does work in there. So I'm going to apply that. And so they're very good at reflecting and acting differently from a leadership perspective. But I would actually say, and the key role of a CEO is temperament. And self-restraint a lot of the time. You've got to think the bigger picture. You've got to understand why people are acting in that way. You've got to look at a system level. So I think those probably things when I was a young start out, it wasn't about all those sorts of things, but now it is. And I really believe in purpose-led organizations. They can always produce very good shareholder dividends, but purpose-led, if you're serving a population, whether it's a customer or a member or anything like that, if you have their interest at heart, over the long term, you're going to be a lot more successful than short-term profit maximization.
Yeah, if you're delivering significant value to your customers, in whatever form that
that's
takes,
a win-win.
That is a win, and not seeking to purely maximize, and instead you're trying to deliver something of real significance to them. That is, I guess everyone defines purpose in a different way, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. James, do you have any other questions for Nick? We've covered so much.
I guess it's looking, we've touched on it somewhat with some of those new drugs and technology and things like that, but I guess there's some, when I think of healthcare and you hear it, the new top news of Radio New Zealand this morning was around lack of nurses in North Shore Hospital, I think it was, and it seems to be the same problem year in year out. If there's which is it's underfunded, but the funding requirements are getting more and more, and for reasons we discussed. It, is that? Are you optimistic about the future of healthcare? And I'm not talking about Southern Cross, taking yourself out of that for a bit, but just it is a worrisome thing to always hear day in, day out. And like I said, my British tilt as well. So you hear it there, the NHS is about to crumble, and you hear it here, the health system is underfunded, and you think of it from an operating expenses position, it's really underfunded, lack of nursing, but also there's all the hospitals need to be redone. There's not enough infrastructure. There's fleas in carpet. I mean, it just sounds like such an enormous task. At the same time, frankly, the tax rate in New Zealand's pretty low compared to most other countries, and we don't really have a way to keep funding it. Are we looking down the barrel of something really poor and bad happening, or is this just politics because election year and actually it's actually looking pretty good?
Yeah, look, I'm actually quite positive when you look down 50 years of healthcare in the New Zealand setting. I mean, I think, as you know, if you've ever been into the public or private health system, you've got these wonderful people. I mean, a lot of this comes from a deep care. I mean, health is actually a caring proposition at its core, and so it attracts people with deep care. Yeah? And so I think there's a lot of passion in the healthcare system, which can come across as not enough. It's coming from all the right place. I mean, you can argue whether $35 billion is enough. There's areas where it's underinvested, and there's areas where there's efficiencies. I can't comment because I'm not actually in the healthcare system, but there will never be enough money for health. So the question is, how do we get a system?
But your metric is not, this sounds really crass, but your metric is not no one dies, because it just is, it can't be.
It can't
that
be,
every hospital
because
is perfect, presumably.
That's right. But where I see across the world health systems, the ones who try and prevent you from getting into hospital, or you should only be in hospital because you need to be in hospital, the system is wider than a hospital network, they've got a better shot. And I think that's what I think the opportunity is, to see health as at a system level, not its ecosystem, or because it's quite fragmented, and be very intentional over the next 20 or 30 years to design that. Because when demand's going like that and supply is going like that, that is a massive pressure point. And so I think our opportunity is to be very intentional around that design. People should only be in hospital, only if they've been prevented and getting, the right care in the right setting at the right time. That's actually what to do. So, I mean, we had major nurse issues post-COVID. We did, but the supply actually responded quite quickly. But there will always be pockets of stresses in the health system. It is.
That's the bit I find really hard to. The media is not a great source of information for the totality of the health system.
Yeah, I don't even know what the problem is, because I'm not can define it.
Because there's so many different, and it's across
a
hugely complicated system, and in any hospital, I mean, in any business and any team, you sometimes there's the goods and the bads and everything. So, and then we click on the ones that inspire a certain emotion from us more than the ones that don't, and so you kind of get this sort of self-fulfilling sense.
Yeah. Well, as I say, if I look at little Southern Cross, I mean, we do about 17,500 claims a day. That's 3.8 million a year. So that's 3.8 million procedures. And so 17,000 times a day, we get it right, but we might have a complaint from here and there. So there's a large amount of things that go extremely well in our health systems, but you're judged quite rightly, I think, by the things that don't go wrong. I mean, the health systems have got to get things right. I mean, it's not like it's trivial or it's not meaningful. And so I like the idea that we've got to everyday turn up to make the system better. If you lose that will, I think health systems are in trouble.
I mean, if you're an electricity provider and you cut someone's electricity off, it's not the end of the world. If you do something wrong in the healthcare system, you sort of only have one shot in some senses. So the worst case scenario is worse in healthcare, but it's a tough slog.
It's a very tough slog. Yep.
But an important one.
It is. It's very meaningful. Mm-hmm.
On that note, Nick, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great conversation, and we've covered lots of really interesting things. I wish you the very best for the next phase.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
really
watching from afar.
Yeah, great stuff.
And these businesses that might get your expertise to help grow in New Zealand, they'll be very, very lucky to have you. So
Thank you. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
It's going to be great.
Great.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
New Zealand Funds Management Limited is the issuer of the NZ Funds Active Income Series, NZ Funds Active Inflation Series and NZ Funds Active Growth Series, together the NZ Funds Active Series, as well as the NZ Funds KiwiSaver Scheme, the NZ Funds Managed Superannuation Service, NZ Funds Wealth Builder and NZ Funds Income Generator. For further information or to request a copy of the product disclosure statement for each of these, please contact NZ Funds or visit nzfunds.co.nz. This recording is provided for information purposes only. The information provided is not intended as a substitute for specific professional advice on investments, financial planning, or any other matter. Past performance is not an indication of future returns.